Ezra Bell was just a dockhand, until a $5 million yacht began to sink, laughed at, ignored, mocked by a rich white mogul who said, "Fix it, and I'll give you the boat." 10 minutes later, Ezra silenced the marina and exposed a system built to keep men like him invisible. But one leak was never just a leak. It was a doorway, and behind it lay decades of sabotage, buried brilliance, and a reckoning no one saw coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sun glistened across the Charleston harbor like a polished coin, throwing reflections against the glassy marina water. Seagulls wheeled above the luxury boats docked in their berths, but none caught more attention than the newest addition, a towering snow-white yacht with a name stenciled in golden cursive, the Sovereign Belle, a $5 million masterpiece of marine engineering, now leaking steadily from its base. Thatcher Winslow stood at the end of Dock 7 with his hands in his pockets, tailored blazer fluttering in the coastal breeze. Everything about him screamed inherited wealth, from the hand-stitched Italian loafers to the dismissive way he regarded the half-dozen mechanics scurrying around his yacht like ants. His gaze was bored, annoyed, above it all, because no one, not one of them, had solved the problem. "This thing's been here 4 days, he muttered to his assistant, a wiry man clutching an iPad like a shield. "I've had engineers flown in, divers, mechanics, all useless." The assistant nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. The valve system's been tested, and the bilge—" "I didn't ask for a damn textbook," Winslow cut in. "I asked for a boat that floats." Around them, marina workers kept a careful distance. They knew his temper and his reputation. Winslow wasn't just rich, he was connected, the type who donated to museums and lobbied for zoning changes in a single call. Humbling him was career suicide, which is why no one dared speak when he threw his coffee into the water and barked, "Get someone with a brain." It was then that Ezra Bell stepped forward, quietly, hesitantly, his brown coveralls dusted with marine salt. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even make eye contact at first, just walked up with a wrench tucked in his belt and a clipboard in hand. The marina manager, an aging man named Colin Hart, rolled his eyes. "Don't waste Mr. Winslow's time, Ezra," he muttered. "This is out of your league." But Ezra didn't turn back. His eyes were fixed on the yacht, specifically the subtle shift in its lean, just enough to suggest water pooling in the lower port hold. No words, just observation. Winslow noticed the silence, then scoffed. "What's this? The janitor wants a crack at it?" Laughter rippled among the dock staff. The kind of laughter born not from humor but obedience. Ezra still said nothing, just set down his clipboard and walked toward the inspection ladder. "You know what?" Winslow said, voice laced with condescension. "Fix the leak, and the yacht's yours." The dockhands roared. One of them clapped Ezra on the back mockingly. Another whispered, "Hope you can swim, Bell." But Ezra just knelt at the edge of the hull. His fingers traced the salt lines, feeling the pressure against the fiberglass panels. There, barely visible, was a hairline crack, running just beneath the stern exhaust. Not from an accident. A design flaw, a misaligned ballast valve. The leak had nothing to do with poor maintenance. It was born from precision error, a mistake invisible to most. He stood, turned to the marina manager, and said quietly, "I'll need 10 minutes. Silence fell. Winslow's smirk dropped an inch. 10 minutes? Ezra nodded once. No swagger, no plea, just certainty. Behind him, a whisper of tension coiled through the marina. No one laughed this time, because something in Ezra's voice didn't sound like a bluff. He picked up a single tool from his kit, a flexible inspection scope, and climbed aboard the Sovereign Bell as if it were any other boat. But everyone on the dock knew this wasn't any boat. It was a floating palace, a symbol of supremacy, and here was a dockhand, a black man with calloused hands and no formal degree, daring to touch it. As Ezra disappeared into the engine bay, the remaining dock workers exchanged glances. Some were skeptical, others uneasy. Colin Hart looked nervous, chewing the inside of his cheek. Winslow pulled out his phone, muttering something about calling his insurance agent. Minutes passed, and then something strange happened. The slow trickle of water from the yacht's hull stopped. Winslow walked to the edge of the dock, eyes narrowing. The engine lights blinked. The bilge pump hummed, then stopped. The yacht stopped listing. Olivia Greer, a freelance journalist covering a piece on marine infrastructure failures, happened to be nearby. She snapped a photo, Then another, as Ezra reappeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't gloat, didn't explain, just handed the wrench back to the dockhand beside him. Winslow stared, bewildered. What did you do? Ezra simply replied, realigned the ballast system. You had a false positive reading from the automated sensors. The backup line was flooding the primary tank. Winslow blinked, lost. You're saying the boat was sinking itself, he said, incredulous? Ezra nodded. Design flaw. Internal. Easy fix if you know where to look. The journalist raised an eyebrow. The marina fell dead quiet. Ezra turned to leave. And that's when Winslow's voice rang out again, this time harder to place, part disbelief, part irritation. Hey! You didn't fix that in 10 minutes. That was just luck. Ezra paused, turned back slightly, but didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said it all. And just as he was about to walk off the dock, Olivia snapped a final photo, then whispered to herself, "Who is this man?" As Ezra stepped back onto the dock, wiping the salt from his palms, Olivia checked her camera and noticed something in the background. A faint detail no one else had seen, a second deeper crack, missed by all, but directly aligned with Ezra's path. He had seen it before even touching the yacht, and he never said a word. The next morning, the marina was humming with the kind of orchestrated quiet that only followed controversy. The gossip moved slower than usual, not whispered, but buried under polite greetings and tightened smiles. Ezra's name wasn't spoken, not out loud, but it hovered in every nod, every clipboard check, every half glance toward Dock 7. The schedule board outside the operations office had been wiped clean of his shifts. In his place, a newcomer stood, a young man named Tyler, fresh out of a maritime program in Florida. White, clean-shaven, overconfident, he wore Ezra's exact uniform, down to the stitched initials on the breast pocket. Ezra didn't fight it. He didn't ask why. He didn't report it. Instead, he walked back into the same shed where he'd spent 6 years solving problems no one else could. This time, though, he wasn't carrying tools. Just silent. Olivia Greer watched from a distance, notebook in hand. She hadn't left Charleston since the incident with the Sovereign Bell. Something about Ezra had embedded itself into her bones. His genius was undeniable. But it wasn't just that. It was the quiet rejection of the praise he'd earned. The refusal to speak when everyone else was trying to own the moment. She approached the shed that afternoon, her press badge tucked into her pocket, and knocked lightly on the frame. Ezra didn't look up. "They don't allow reporters back here." "I'm not reporting," Olivia said. "I'm listening." He looked at her, then calm but unreadable. "That's worse." There was no anger in his voice. Just a tired sort of knowing, the kind that accumulates after years of watching less qualified men receive more praise, more money, more titles. Olivia stepped inside anyway. "You don't want to tell your story?" Ezra shook his head. "You don't understand. They didn't forget to promote me. They remembered and chose not to. That's the difference." She wanted to argue, to ask why he wouldn't want the truth out, but she stopped herself. She had learned enough from watching to realize Ezra wasn't chasing redemption. He was surviving erasure. So she started the story without him. Back in her hotel room, she opened her laptop and began digging. Within days, she'd mapped 6 years of maintenance logs, repair tickets, incident reports, and shift schedules. One name repeated again and again beneath the most complicated repairs. E. Bell. Leaks resealed, navigation errors corrected, hydraulic malfunctions diagnosed without full system shutdowns. She highlighted each one, forming a spreadsheet that painted a pattern. Ezra had fixed more high-priority issues than anyone else on staff. But when she checked the personnel records, no promotion, no raises, no mention, nothing. She reached out to former marina employees. Many refused to speak. Some gave vague quotes. He was smart, yeah, but weirdly quiet. Others hinted at resentment. He thought he was better than the rest of us. But one voice stood out. Denise Harlow, a former operations coordinator who had left the marina 2 years prior. "Ezra? Oh, they kept him exactly where they wanted him," she said over the phone. "There was a meeting. I'll never forget it. He had just prevented a total system failure in the fueling docks. I pushed for a commendation. My supervisor said, 'He's good with his hands, but let's not get carried away.'" Olivia typed every word with shaking fingers. It wasn't just neglect. It was designed. Quiet suppression wrapped in professionalism. She compiled it all into a draft. Title: "The Man They Didn't Want the World to Know." Subtitle: How a Black Dockhand Outsmarted Engineers and Got Erased from History. She brought it to her editor at Coastline Journal, a mid-tier digital outlet with a loyal boating and infrastructure readership. He read the draft slowly, said nothing for several minutes, then leaned back in his chair and exhaled. It's good. Really good. But we can't run it. She blinked. What? Thatcher Winslow's people sponsor 2 of our main newsletters. And the Charleston Marina advertises with us every spring. Olivia's stomach dropped. This isn't an opinion piece. It's documented discrimination, data, interviews, everything. I know what it is, he interrupted. And I know what it'll cost us. She stood, biting down the urge to shout. So that's it? We bury it because the racism is too profitable? He didn't flinch. No, we don't bury it. We wait. Maybe push it in a slow cycle. Maybe water it down, add a counterpoint. Give them a chance to respond. But Olivia knew that tone. The truth didn't die in flames. It died in negotiation. She walked out and uploaded the full piece to her personal blog instead. Unfiltered, unapologetic. She included Ezra's name. Every quote, every spreadsheet. By 9 a.m., it had over 500 shares. By noon, it had passed. People were angry. People were amazed. People were demanding answers. Hashtags like Engineer Ezra and Silent Genius flooded social media. Celebrities retweeted the story. Activist pages picked it up. Even tech and engineering forums were buzzing, stunned that someone with that level of knowledge had been silenced for so long. But with the attention came something else. A different kind of silence. Winslow's office refused comment. And Ezra, he hadn't returned to the marina at all. From a burner email account. No name, no signature. You made him visible. And attached, a hidden folder of internal marina emails marked confidential. Inside was something that would ignite a wildfire. The marina had never been this quiet. Not during storm warnings. Not during blackouts. Not even when a derailed fuel line had nearly set a yacht ablaze 3 years ago. But this silence was different. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief, salted with something darker. Thatcher Winslow stood motionless, mouth slightly parted, staring at the now placid water beneath the Sovereign Bell. Not a single drop leaked. The boat, his multi-million-dollar trophy, floated with the grace of a swan, unmoved and undamaged, saved by a man whose name he hadn't even bothered to remember. There were no tools left scattered on the dock, no scrambling assistance or half-rigged equipment, just one toolbox, one scope, and one man, Ezra Bell, standing still, his shoulders square, his presence unsettling in its quiet power. Behind Winslow, the laughter from his guests had long evaporated. They clutched their sunglasses and champagne flutes like props, unsure how to perform now that the script had changed. One of them, a hedge fund manager from Miami, cleared his throat and muttered, "So, is he always this quiet?" No one answered. Winslow, lips tightening, turned to the dock manager. "Get me a real marine engineer," he snapped. Colin Hart flinched. "Thatch, he already fixed it." "I said get me someone certified," Winslow growled. Now, within 20 minutes, Mason Carr, a certified marine engineer from a prestigious firm in Charleston, arrived. He wore a blue jumpsuit pressed like dress clothes, a clipboard in one hand, and the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Ezra didn't flinch, didn't even introduce himself. He simply handed Mason the inspection scope and pointed toward the hatch beneath the yacht's stern. Mason descended into the hull. 10 long minutes passed.
Then 15.
Everyone on the dock waited, Winslow pacing, his guests murmuring, Ezra unmoved. When Mason finally emerged, he looked at Ezra for a long moment, then turned to Winslow. "Your ballast valve was corroded," Mason said. Slight misalignment during original installation caused pressure to reroute. This man not only identified it, he rerouted the system without damaging the original design. He paused. "That's not luck. That's expertise." A few gasps slipped from the crowd. Winslow's jaw clenched. He could have tampered with it, caused the leak himself just to look smart. Mason's expression shifted. "You think a dockhand risked sabotage of a $5 million yacht in a marina filled with cameras to make a point?" Winslow said nothing. The implication was enough. The tension was thick as oil. Olivia Greer watched it unfold from behind a line of guests. Her notebook was half full now, but her mind was racing faster than her pen. What she'd witnessed wasn't just a repair, it was a reversal of power. and the men used to holding power were rattling. Ezra, still silent, finally spoke. His voice was even, steady. I didn't fix it for you. The words weren't angry. They were truthful. And they cracked the air like a small hammer tapping glass. Winslow took a slow step forward. Then who'd you fix it for? Yourself? Ezra shook his head, eyes never leaving the boat. For the next man who's blamed when this thing sinks. Winslow opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead of praise, all he could muster was a bitter laugh. You got lucky. But the crowd didn't laugh this time. Not even Colin. Because by now they'd seen what Ezra had done without noise, without credit, without help, and that reality unsettled them far more than a leak ever could. Winslow turned away sharply, signaling for his assistant. Cancel the champagne. Take the boat out. We're done here. Ezra said nothing, just picked up his toolbox, wiped his hands with a faded cloth, and began to walk toward the workshop. Behind him, Olivia followed, unsure if she should interrupt. She didn't need to. As Ezra reached the edge of the dock, he paused. Don't write a hero story, he said without turning around. She blinked. Why not? I'm not the story, he said softly. The silence. Olivia didn't respond. She knew exactly what he meant. But just as Ezra stepped off the dock, a ripple of tension passed through the onlookers. One of the guests, a wiry man with pale blue eyes, leaned into Winslow's ear and whispered something. Winslow's face twisted into something unreadable. Not rage, not shame. Something cold. It would take days for that whisper to materialize into something tangible. But Olivia caught the look. Something was being planned. Later that night, as Ezra locked up the workshop and slipped the mysterious anonymous note into his drawer, he noticed his name had been erased from the marina's official schedule board. No more shifts. No explanation. Just gone. And the next morning, a new dockhand showed up, wearing Ezra's uniform. The silence that followed Ezra's quiet repair was louder than the jeers that had preceded it. As the sovereign bell settled into a gentle stillness, the faint sound of bubbling vanished, like a wound closing with surgical precision. But behind that moment was a much deeper silence, a silence Ezra had known his entire life. Georgia. The air smelled of salt and sawdust. In a worn-out shed just a mile off the Brunswick coast, a young Ezra sat on a splintered stool beside his grandfather's workbench. The old man's hands were dark, cracked from years spent repairing Navy vessels, his fingers steady as he pieced together a diesel regulator that would later power a shrimp boat's return from deep sea. You don't fix an engine by looking at it, the old man would say. You listen to it. Same with people. Ezra listened. He always did. His grandfather, Elijah Bell, had been a Navy engineer during the Korean War, but back then, even after years of service, black men weren't allowed to command teams or carry formal titles. He came home with calloused palms and no pension, no recognition, just a pile of unsung brilliance passed down like a sacred heirloom. Ezra's father, Samuel, inherited that skill, along with a fierce pride and quiet endurance. He didn't join the Navy. He became a fisherman. Woke up at 3 a.m., mended his own nets, and sold his catch door to door. Ezra often sat beside him in the boat's cabin, taking apart cracked valves and listening to how pressure shifted with temperature. He learned that engines had moods, just like people. But as Ezra reached his late teens, the walls of opportunity narrowed around him. Despite top marks in high school, no engineering program accepted him. Not a single university. Some letters claimed his practical experience didn't meet admission criteria. Others simply never replied. One counselor even said, "You'd make a solid mechanic, Ezra. Why aim higher?" He didn't argue. He just watched the river. And when a full scholarship went to a classmate who had once asked him how a piston worked, Ezra didn't complain. He picked up his tools, found work cleaning boats at the Charleston Marina, kept his head down, but he remembered. Present day. The chuckles returned slowly, awkward and uncertain. The yacht was still, but the crowd couldn't accept what they had witnessed. Winslow's wealthy guests clutched their drinks tighter, casting nervous glances at Ezra. Another chimed in, louder. Maybe the leak fixed itself. Happens with these newer models. Self-sealing polymers, and whatnot. Ezra heard every word, not because he was eavesdropping, but because years of being ignored had sharpened his hearing. At the edge of the dock, a young dockhand named Carter, a white man barely 22, leaned toward Ezra and whispered with a grin, "Guess you do know how to turn a wrench, huh?" It was meant to be a compliment. But it didn't land that way. Instead, he crouched once more beside the Sovereign Bell, ran his fingers along the undercarriage, and double-checked the ballast sensors. Perfect balance. He had rerouted the secondary exhaust to offload pressure without altering the central design, a fix so advanced that even the boat's own diagnostics had missed it. Behind him, Olivia Greer remained quiet. Her camera hung at her side now. What she had seen, it wasn't just competence, it was brilliance. Raw, unpolished, ignored brilliance. She approached the marina manager, Colin Hart. "That man," she said, gesturing at Ezra. "What's his title here? Has he always been a dockhand?" Hart laughed dryly. "Miss, we're a small operation. Everyone pulls their weight. But he just solved $1 million problem in minutes," she replied, her voice sharpening. Hart's tone changed. Defensive now. "We don't do politics here, ma'am. He's a good worker, but let's not make a spectacle out of this." Olivia took a long breath. She'd heard this tone before, the polite racism of managerial dismissal. Meanwhile, Ezra stood and quietly packed away his scope. Colin approached him. "Nice work. Real smooth. Don't expect a bonus, though. We don't pay for guesses." Ezra met his eyes. Calm, cold, silent. Winslow, from his end of the dock, adjusted his blazer and waved to his guests. "Let's not waste the day. Champagne on the deck while it's still floating." Laughter followed, but this time it was thinner, hollow. One of the guests, a woman in pearls and sunglasses, turned to Winslow. "Are you really giving him the yacht? You did promise." Winslow waved dismissively. "That was a joke, darling. No one thought the man would actually fix it. It's not like he owns the marina now." Ezra heard that too, and still said nothing, but the words pierced deeper than they knew. As Ezra walked back toward the workshop shed, his reflection passed over a puddle of oil near the pier, distorted, fractured, just like the world he lived in, fixed on the surface, still broken underneath. A few yards away, Olivia pulled out her notebook and scribbled something. He fixed the leak, but there's still leaking hate. She had come to write about boats, but now she was writing about America. As Ezra reached the shed and closed the door behind him, he noticed something tucked beneath the workshop bench, a folded sheet of paper with his name on it. Inside, an anonymous note written in bold, scratchy ink. "They don't want you to fix the next one." No name. No explanation. Just that. And the shadow of something much bigger than a leak. By sunrise the next day, the headline had already reached every corner of the internet. "Black Dockhand Fixes Yacht in Minutes After Millionaire Scoffs." Beneath it, Olivia's expose unfurled like a revelation. Meticulous data, a decade of suppressed labor, emails loaded with racial subtext, and Ezra Bell, the man the world never knew it needed, at the center of it all. Within hours, it caught fire. Memes poured in. Ezra photoshopped in superhero capes. Ezra silencing dripping yachts with a single finger. Ezra under a caption that read, "He fixed the boat. Now fix the system." But something more serious stirred beneath the digital applause. Ezra became a symbol. A vessel for every black worker who'd been overlooked. Every genius who'd been talked over. Every hand that had built something remarkable, only to be ignored. And that visibility? It came with a cost. By 9 a.m., the marina's phone lines were jammed. By noon, the hate mail began. It started subtle snide comments from unknown addresses. Then harsher, more vicious, racial slurs buried in subject lines. Messages like "Stay in your lane, Bell," and "You should be grateful you even had a job." Some were signed, others weren't. The marina's inbox flooded. So did their voicemail. Colin Hart stood in his office, shoulders tense, as message after message played on speaker. Firing him would be the best thing you ever did. "If that dockhand gets a raise, I'm pulling my yacht and my membership." Hart rubbed his temples and muttered to his assistant, "We need to do something." "Like what?" the assistant asked. "Defend him?" Hart's look was cold. "No. Distance ourselves." Meanwhile, Winslow's world was unraveling in slower, sharper ways. His PR team scrambled to push back the narrative. Statements were drafted, sanitized language about deep respect for all our staff, and misunderstood interactions. But the screenshots told a different story. His smirk, his dismissive his "fix it and I'll give you the yacht" bet caught on camera by a tourist and uploaded without context. In just 2 days, his brand as a tech philanthropist and maritime innovator had crumbled. Public trust began hemorrhaging, and then he snapped. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Olivia Greer, The claim alleged intentional misrepresentation, reputational damage, and malicious journalism. The dollar amount, $5 million. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She had exposed the man who mocked a dockhand. Now he was suing her for telling the world. Olivia refused to take it down. She released another post, this time with video snippets, direct quotes from witnesses, and most damning of all, the leaked internal emails from the anonymous source. Subject lines like, "Keep Bell out of PR, not the right face. Too mouthy. Too black. Too much risk. Let the white kid handle the VIP docs." The story turned from local scandal to national outrage. News anchors picked it up. Talk shows debated it. Civil rights attorneys offered Olivia pro bono defense. And through it all, Ezra stayed silent. Not because he was afraid, but because he was tired. The world had finally heard his name. But it didn't ask for his voice, only his image. He returned to the marina quietly, early in the morning, to find his locker padlocked, and a maintenance under audit sign posted on the shed door. When he knocked on Colin Hart's office, the man didn't even look up. "We're under too much pressure, Bell," Hart said, flipping through papers. "The board's meeting about your exposure. Sponsors are calling. It's a bad situation." Ezra stood still. "I didn't ask to be in a story." Hart sighed. "Yeah. Well, you are one now." Later that week, protest signs lined the marina entrance. Some held signs that read, "Ezra deserves more," and "Silence is complicity." But others showed up too. Angry, pale faces wrapped in flags. Signs that screamed, "We built this dock," and "White jobs matter." The marina became a war zone of narrative. One side yelling for justice, the other demanding erasure. Caught in the center was a man who had simply fixed a leak. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the decision came. The marina board held a closed-door vote. No press, no protesters, just 8 white men and 1 hesitant woman, seated around a polished oak table, debating the weight of public relations over moral truth. The verdict? Ezra Bell was terminated effective immediately due to breach of internal communications policy and unauthorized exposure of sensitive workplace activity. No handshake. No thank you. Just a printed letter taped to the door of his shed, folded neatly under the handle of his own toolbox. When Ezra returned and saw it, he didn't read it right away. He just stood there, shoulders soaking in rain, staring at the water that still cradled the Sovereign Bell, the same boat he had saved, now docked under someone else's name. Olivia arrived minutes later, breathless from the protest lines. She saw the paper in his hand. "They fired you." Ezra nodded once. "You didn't even speak to the media," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong. I did everything right," he said. "That's what they couldn't handle." She stepped closer. "Do you want to fight this?" He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since this all began, his voice cracked just barely. "No," he said. "I want to be somewhere that never needed this fight in the first place." And then he walked, past the dock, past the boat, past the crowd still arguing over his name. That evening, as Ezra sat alone on a bench overlooking the water, his phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. "We've been watching. We have a better offer. No PR, no politics, just respect. Call us." Attached the logo of a black-owned marine engineering firm based in Atlanta. Ezra stared at it for a long time, then slowly smiled. The South Georgia air was thick with pine and memory. As Ezra stepped off the bus, duffel bags slung over his shoulder, the red clay beneath his boots felt heavier than he remembered. The small weathered road that led to his mother's house hadn't changed, still lined with cracked pavement, still whispering the stories of all the men who had walked it before him with tired shoulders and brilliant minds. No one had cared to notice. It was dusk when he reached the porch. The porch light flickered once, then stayed on, like a quiet welcome. His mother, Alma Bell, opened the screen door before he could knock. She wore a faded apron, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her face a portrait of strength worn smooth by years of holding together what the world kept trying to pull apart. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, not for the clothes or the bag or the bruised pride he carried, but for the thing beneath it, the fire that hadn't gone out. "You hungry?" she finally asked. Ezra nodded. They ate in silence. Biscuits and okra, collards from the backyard garden. She poured sweet tea into glass jars and sat across from him at the old oak table, the one carved by his grandfather's hands. "They fired you?" she asked softly. "Yeah." Alma stirred her tea. "After you saved their $1 million boat." He looked away. I told your father they'd never let you rise too high, she continued. Not because you couldn't, but because you might make it look easy. Ezra's hands curled around the glass. I didn't even ask for anything. I just fixed the leak. His mother leaned forward, her voice low, but unwavering. You didn't just fix a boat, baby. You cracked the illusion. They don't hate you for being wrong. They hate you for being right, and not needing them to be. Ezra looked up, eyes glinting with the weight of it. We build what others steal, Alma said, placing her palm over his. That's been our story for generations. You just showed the whole country what that looks like. The next morning, a familiar knock rattled the screen door. Olivia stood outside, winded from the walk up the dirt path, holding a folder and her press badge. Ezra opened the door but didn't step aside. I'm not here to interview, she said quickly. I'm here to check on you. He hesitated, then let her in. They sat again at that same oak table. This time, Olivia did the talking. You've become more than a headline, Ezra. People are organizing, donating. They're asking why someone like you was kept in the shadows for so long. Ezra raised an eyebrow. And what are they hoping I'll say? That you're angry. That you want justice. That you want to fight. He shook his head. I'm not interested in performing pain for their comfort. Olivia looked pained. I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying the story isn't done yet. Winslow's suing me. The court date's been set. And your silence? It's louder than any of their statements. Ezra leaned back. Then let it speak. She left the folder on the table. A copy of the court summons, and several letters of support from organizations across the country. When she left, Alma picked it up, flipping through the pages. That man, she said, tapping Winslow's name. He don't scare me. He doesn't scare me either, Ezra replied. Then why are you letting him own your ending? Ezra didn't answer. Not because he couldn't, but because he wasn't sure what the ending even looked like anymore. By that weekend, Black communities across Georgia, the Carolinas, and as far west as Mississippi had launched a GoFundMe titled, For Ezra, a Genius Unrecognized. The donations poured in, small bills, big hearts. People sent messages like, you reminded me of my father, and we see you now. Local churches passed the plate, with Ezra's name spoken in prayers. High school STEM clubs printed posters of him. A former HBCU professor offered him an honorary guest lecture spot. And still, Ezra stayed quiet. Still, he worked with his hands, fixed his mother's generator, repaired an old neighbor's broken water heater, rewired a church ceiling fan. Not because he was proving anything, but because solving problems was his language. It always had been. Late one night, as the wind carried the chirps of cicadas, and the porch light flickered again, Alma sat beside him on the porch steps. You gonna be all right? She asked. He nodded. You believe that? He paused. I want to. Then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed. An email. From unknown@aegisnautical.tech. Subject respect. Opportunity. No cameras. The body was brief. We followed your work for years. We saw what they did. We won't ask for a story. We just want your mind. Aegis Nautical is the country's leading Black-owned marine tech firm. We'd like to offer you a lead engineer role. No PR, no press, just dignity. Let us build something together. Ezra read it twice. Then again, Alma leaned over and read it with him. She smiled. That's the offer your grandfather never got. Ezra stared at the glowing screen. And for the first time in weeks, something in his chest loosened. Just as he began typing a reply, a new message arrived. This one from a newsroom assistant at a national media outlet. Attached a confidential recording, Winslow's voice, saying, I don't care if we have to ruin his life. He's not getting famous off my yacht. Ezra's fingers froze above the keyboard. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The building that housed Aegis Nautical stood like a monument to everything Ezra thought he'd never see in his lifetime. Sleek glass walls, solar panel roofs, and a reception desk staffed by people who looked like him. The air inside buzzed with innovation, not hierarchy. No fake smiles, no stiff uniforms. Just engineers in hoodies debating hydrodynamic pressure systems over coffee. When Ezra walked in, the receptionist didn't ask who he was. She stood and extended her hand. You must be Engineer Bell. Welcome to Aegis. He paused for half a beat. That name, Engineer Bell, hit different. It wasn't a promotion. It was recognition. The kind that doesn't come with fanfare, but with quiet respect. The kind he'd never been given back in Charleston, not even after saving a millionaire's vessel from disaster. They led him down a hallway lined with photos, not of CEOs in suits, but of welders, divers, field techs and innovators, each labeled with their title and achievement. In the center of the hallway was a wall made entirely of etched names, Black marine pioneers who paved the way, names that had never made textbooks, men and women who died unknown but left behind brilliance. And now his name would be added to that wall. By lunchtime he had his own office, not a closet, not a storage room, an office with blueprints spread across the desk and a digital wall display, highlighting live diagnostics from Aegis-designed vessels across the eastern seaboard. The moment he logged in, an email popped up from the Aegis founder, Langston Miles. "You've earned this. Don't shrink. We don't play modest here. Make noise." Ezra smiled for the first time in days. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Olivia's blog had morphed into something bigger. No longer just a personal website, it had become Redline Uncovered, a digital platform dedicated to exposing workplace injustice. Each post now reached tens of thousands, and the story of Ezra Bell became a cornerstone, driving young journalists and whistleblowers to send in their own cases. One of her interns, a soft-spoken tech nerd named Jeremy, discovered something unusual during an archive scan, a flood of recent edits to Winslow's digital media profiles. Suddenly, photos had vanished, articles rewritten, key quotes mysteriously softened. Winslow's PR team had launched a coordinated campaign. One video from a yacht show resurfaced, heavily edited. The original footage where Winslow mocked Ezra was replaced with clips of him laughing with workers rather than at them. A statement followed shortly after, delivered to major outlets. "Mr. Winslow has always appreciated the hard work of his staff. The recent social media controversy is based on a misinterpreted, light-hearted exchange. We have reached out privately to Mr. Bell with an offer to clarify and resolve any misunderstandings." But Ezra had never received any message. They were rewriting history again. Olivia posted a new piece. "They laughed when he fixed it. Now they're editing him out." And once again, the story exploded. But this time it unearthed something far more powerful. An anonymous tip came through her encrypted email portal. "I used to work under Colin Hart. I kept receipts. Check the attachment." The file contained hundreds of internal emails from the marina's admin system. Many were mundane. Schedule adjustments, purchase orders, but others, they told a different story. "Don't assign Ezra to Dock 1. Winslow says he wants someone more presentable. His work's solid, but not promotable. Too introverted. Plus optics. Can we rotate Bell to night shifts? Less visibility during VIP tours." Olivia's hands trembled as she read. This wasn't bias, it was intentional. Documented suppression. Proof that Ezra had been passed over, excluded, erased by design. She flagged one email in particular. It was dated 2 years prior. Subject line, "Promotion Review, E." In it, a supervisor clearly wrote, "Technically Bell has the highest performance scores on staff, but promoting him may cause discomfort among senior members. We recommend extending his current role for team cohesion." Ezra had never seen that message. He'd assumed he was being overlooked, because he hadn't spoken up enough, because he didn't network, because he didn't smile when others failed upward. But the truth was worse. He was deliberately denied for being exactly who he was, and for doing it better than everyone else. Olivia called him that night. He answered on the second ring. "They blocked your promotion, Ezra. Even after ranking you number 1. His voice was quiet. "Send me the email." "I already did." She hesitated. "Do you want me to go public with it?" There was a long pause on the line. Then he said, "Not yet. Let me read it first." He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stared at the message until sunrise. Not because it shocked him, but because it confirmed what he'd felt in his bones for years. That excellence wasn't always the currency in systems built to suppress. At Aegis the next morning, Ezra walked into a meeting room, where engineers debated turbine shapes and sea current modeling. Langston Miles was at the head of the table, laughing with a junior designer. Ezra waited for a pause, then spoke. "Can I say something?" Everyone turned. Langston nodded. "Please." Ezra walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, drew a schematic of a ballast system redesign he'd been sketching since his second year at the marina, one that could automatically adjust for uneven weight distribution using adaptive AI. "This is what I was told wasn't worth promoting," he said. Let's build it here. The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. Langston clapped last. Engineer Bell lead the team. Back in Charleston, the anonymous whistleblower messaged Olivia again. This time, with a screenshot labeled HR Blacklist, Ezra's name was at the top, highlighted in red. Beside it, a note, do not recommend for rehire. Political liability. And below that, something even more chilling. Watch for leaks. The morning Olivia published the emails, it felt like flipping a nation's pressure valve. Her headline was uncompromising. They knew. They blocked him. And they kept the doors closed. Below it, a carousel of damning emails, each time-stamped, each signed, each shredding the carefully manicured image of Charleston's elite marina management. The public reaction wasn't immediate. It was explosive. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. The Guardian, The Atlantic, CNN Black Voices, each running their own analysis of what was now being dubbed the Bell suppression files. But the documents didn't just expose bias. They revealed an institutional pattern of discrimination so casually orchestrated it read more like protocol than prejudice. One email even recommended limiting black staff to backdock shifts during high-profile events, to maintain a consistent brand aesthetic. That line made headlines on its own. Charleston's black community mobilized fast. Leaders from local churches, civil rights groups, and student unions flooded the marina gates. Protest signs waved in the warm breeze like flames. Ezra fixed the leak. You broke the system. Not a liability, a legacy. You can't silence genius. The marina's leadership, already staggering from Olivia's first expose, now faced a full-scale revolt. Boycotts began immediately. 3 yacht owners pulled out. 2 seafood vendors terminated their contracts. A prestigious boating club rescinded their summer deal. Within 72 hours, 6 marina board members had resigned, including Colin Hart. And yet, even as the pressure mounted, Thatcher Winslow refused to fold. He released a recorded statement from his coastal estate, seated before a fireplace that flickered with staged humility. I've been wrongly vilified, he said, his voice steady but defensive. This isn't about race. This is about a personal grudge. I've supported diversity in all my ventures. What's happening now? It's a witch hunt. Reverse discrimination, plain and simple. The backlash was immediate. Social media dragged him with hashtags like sunk by privilege and reverse disgrace. Still, some right-wing commentators echoed his stance, turning Ezra into an unwilling poster child for their own warped narratives. They claimed he overplayed the race card, that Olivia doctored emails, and that the real victims were men like Winslow, powerful, white, and now publicly shamed. But amid all the noise, something quieter, more powerful began to take root. A class-action lawsuit. 5 former black marina workers stepped forward, armed with their own stories. Stories of sudden demotions after outperforming white peers, of being called boy in meetings, of having resumes accidentally deleted, of being warned that some roles aren't for everyone. The law firm representing them called the case Bell v. Charleston Waters. Ezra wasn't technically part of the original suit, but his story was the catalyst, the proof that the rot wasn't just accidental. It was systemic. And then the subpoena came. Delivered in a crisp envelope with the state seal, addressed to Ezra Bell, at Aegis Nautical. He opened it slowly, hands still grease-smudged from an engine calibration he'd been working on. Inside. You are hereby summoned to testify as a material witness in the case of Bell v. Charleston Waters. Langston Miles walked in moments later, reading the tension on Ezra's face like a sonar read out. You all right? Ezra nodded once. They want me to speak. Langston raised an eyebrow. You ready to? Ezra looked back at the subpoena. I don't know. Langston stepped closer. Let me ask you something. When you rewired that ballast sensor on Winslow's boat, did you hesitate? No. Then don't start now. Ezra sat down in silence, the weight of the moment settling around him like the engine rooms he used to crawl through, dark, confined, hot with pressure. Because this time, he wouldn't be fixing a leak. He'd be exposing a flood. That evening, Ezra sat in his office, preparing for the deposition. An email pinged. No subject. No sender. Just a single line of text. You testify, and we'll bury your mother's house in paperwork and code violations. Stay quiet. Ezra froze. This wasn't about a job anymore. This was war. The courthouse in downtown Charleston was a century-old monument to justice, stately, cold, and built from the same stone that had once anchored slave blocks just miles away. Its white columns gleamed under the southern sun, but the people gathering beneath them knew that justice had never truly been colorblind here. Inside courtroom 4B, the benches filled quickly. Legal teams, journalists, former marina employees, activists, and quiet citizens who had read Ezra's story and wanted to witness what would happen when silence was finally broken. Ezra sat on the witness stand in a crisp pressed navy blue shirt. No tie. Just plain, honest fabric. Langston Miles sat behind him, arms folded, jaw tight. Olivia was in the second row, notebook balanced on her knee. Her pen hovered, but even she hesitated to write the moment down. It felt sacred. The attorney for the plaintiffs, Kendra Lawson, rose to her feet. "Mr. Bell," she began, her voice clear but soft. "Can you tell the court what your role was at Charleston Waters Marina?" Ezra spoke evenly, like a man who'd lived the words he was now being asked to say. "Dockhand," he replied. "For 6 years. Were you ever promoted during that time?" "No." "Despite receiving performance scores in the top percentile for over 4 years?" "Yes." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Did you ever file a formal complaint?" "No," Ezra said, "because I knew it wouldn't go anywhere, and because I needed the job." Lawson stepped closer. "Can you describe what it felt like being denied advancement, praise, and dignity while watching others rise around you?" Ezra's gaze didn't flinch. "It felt like being underwater. You're doing everything to stay afloat, fixing holes in the ship, guiding others, and still they act like you're the one who doesn't belong." Several reporters began scribbling furiously. Lawson nodded. "Did anyone at the marina ever mention race explicitly in relation to your position?" "No. They didn't have to. It was in their decisions, their eyes, their silence." "Can you recall the moment you realized this wasn't personal, but systemic?" Ezra leaned forward, just slightly. "When I fixed a yacht, no one else could. When the owner mocked me, promised me the boat as a joke, then tried to erase the moment I succeeded. That's when I knew they wanted my labor, not my legacy." Across the courtroom, Winslow sat in a dark suit, flanked by his attorneys. He kept his expression unreadable, but the red crawling up his collar betrayed him. Lawson turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence the email titled Promotion Review E-Bell." The judge nodded. The screen behind Ezra illuminated. The words flashed for everyone to see. "Technically, Bell has the highest performance scores on staff, but promoting him may cause discomfort among senior members. We recommend extending his current role for team cohesion." Gasps, followed by silence thick enough to slow time. The defense didn't object. They couldn't. Ezra continued his testimony, walking the courtroom through years of overlooked contributions, the manual rewrites he'd authored, but never been credited for, the late-night emergency dock repairs, the countless times his work had been passed off as team effort when others failed. He never raised his voice, never leaned on outrage. He didn't need to. Truth, when spoken without apology, carried weight all its own. Then came the surprise. 3 former dockhands, all white, took the stand next. The first, nervous and red-faced, admitted under oath.
"Yeah, we knew Ezra was the best."
They just didn't want someone like him being the face of the operation. Management said it wasn't good optics. "I'm ashamed I went along with it." The second, Jason Carver, spoke with more bite. "They made us sabotage his work sometimes. Loosen bolts he'd just tightened. Delete logs he wrote. Told us to cover our tracks and say it was wear and tear. Said it was harmless correction." A collective exhale swept through the room. The third dockhand broke down midway through his statement, head in hands. "He trained me. I got promoted over him. I never deserved it." By the end of the week, the case had grown too big for Charleston. Federal investigators attended the final 2 days of hearings, taking notes for potential civil rights violations. Olivia's blog became a cited source in court briefs. The Bell suppression files were now part of official public record. Outside the courthouse, national news cameras waited. Ezra didn't speak to them. He didn't need to. The system had already been shaken. Olivia stood beside him, tears in her eyes. "They heard you," she whispered. Ezra glanced around. "They heard us." But as always, just when peace seemed close, the machine struck again. That evening, back at his Aegis office, Ezra opened a letter postmarked from a luxury marine corporation based in San Diego, Horizon Line Technologies.
Inside, a formal offer.
"We have been impressed with your recent visibility and engineering history, Horizon would like to offer you the position of lead vessel architect. Compensation, $320,000 annually. Private housing, company equity, NDA required. The final line glared back at him. In exchange, you agree not to speak publicly or publish any details related to your previous employment or media coverage. Langston entered the office just as Ezra held the paper up. That's the price, huh? Ezra muttered. Langston read the letter. Big offer. Big silence. Ezra folded it once, twice, then stared at the trash bin beside his desk. They want the genius, not the journey, he said. Before he could drop it, his phone buzzed again. A voicemail. From a number listed under private untraceable. He played it. A voice spoke, raspy, familiar, terrified. Ezra, they're not done. They're going after your past next. Your father's military file. It's being rewritten. They're trying to erase everything. Ezra froze. The system wasn't just reacting. It was retaliating. The offer letter sat on Ezra's desk for 2 days, unopened since the voicemail. The 6-figure salary, company equity, the luxury housing on paper. It was a dream. But Ezra knew what it really was. A velvet muzzle. Horizon Line Technologies wasn't paying for his skill. They were trying to buy his silence. On the 3rd morning, he folded the letter neatly and mailed it back, unsigned. Inside the envelope, he included a single note in black ink. Truth is worth more than money. No name. No return address. That afternoon, Olivia met him at a quiet cafe near the Aegis headquarters. She'd just come from an awards ceremony in D.C., where she'd been honored with the Frederick Douglass Medal for Journalistic Courage. Ezra had watched the live stream, but hadn't messaged her. Now, as she approached their table, he stood and embraced her without a word. She sat down, her voice soft. You heard about the Horizon offer? I did, he replied, and I sent it back. A pause. You sure? Ezra nodded. If I sign that NDA, they win. I'd be their genius, but I'd also be their ghost. Olivia leaned in. You know what that means, don't you? You've become more than the story. You're the standard now. Every black engineer, every marginalized mind, they're watching. Ezra took a long breath, nodding slowly. Then let them watch me speak, not shrink. That evening, Ezra appeared in a televised primetime interview with Real America, now a progressive investigative show known for its raw, unscripted interviews. The host introduced him as the man who fixed the yacht and exposed the flood. Sitting under soft lights, wearing a simple gray blazer, Ezra spoke with the same measured cadence he'd always carried. I was never trying to make a statement, he told the host. I was just doing what I knew how to do. Solve problems. But sometimes solving the wrong person's problem shows you were never the problem at all. He didn't bash Winslow. He didn't glorify himself. He spoke about systems, about patterns, about how he grew up hearing stories of men who built engines that powered warships, only to come home and be told they weren't smart enough to manage a team. The clip went viral. Overnight, Truth is Worth More Than Money trended worldwide. Aegis Nautical's website crashed under traffic. Their valuation doubled within weeks, not just from exposure, but from Ezra's impact. His adaptive ballast system was already being piloted in 2 government-contracted research vessels. Engineers called it revolutionary. The Navy called it efficient. But Ezra didn't change. He still wore the same canvas work boots, still drank his coffee black, still rode the bus some mornings. Even when the company offered him a driver, he had no interest in being famous, only in being free. Meanwhile, Thatcher Winslow's world crumbled in silence. His largest investor pulled out. The yacht club revoked his lifetime membership. A conference appearance in Singapore was cancelled after protesters threatened to boycott. Even his philanthropic foundation suffered. The schools he once donated to now returned his checks. The head of one university said bluntly, on camera, "We don't accept generosity extracted from silence." But the final blow came not from media, but from inside his own circle. Ezra received it late one evening. An envelope, cream-colored, thick with no return address. Inside was a single letter, typed, anonymous. Ezra, you don't know me, but I've known you for years. I was part of the Marina's senior leadership team. I was at the meetings. I heard the jokes. I saw the promotions slip past your name, while they went to people who couldn't tighten a bolt without reading a manual.
I should have said something. I didn't. I was afraid of losing my job, of being the traitor. But now, I see the cost.
You didn't just fix a yacht. You shattered the mask we all wore. I'm sorry. I've since resigned. I've donated every bonus I earned during those years to STEM programs at black high schools in South Carolina. It's not enough. It never will be. But it's a start. Thank you for holding steady. For not returning hate with hate. Someone who watched you work, Ezra, read it 3 times, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same drawer where he kept his grandfather's Navy photo. He didn't speak about it to anyone. But the next morning, when Olivia asked how he was feeling, he said something he hadn't said in weeks. I'm tired, he said, but I'm no longer alone. As he walked out of the Aegis building later that day, a courier intercepted him with a sealed envelope. It bore the emblem of the Department of Justice. Ezra opened it under a tree outside. Inside, an official summons to appear before a federal ethics board in Washington. Subject: systemic engineering bias in maritime infrastructure case in E. Bell. He wasn't just a witness anymore. They were building a national case around his testimony. The apology letter haunted Ezra in ways he hadn't expected. Its tone was too honest to ignore, too remorseful to dismiss, but it left behind something colder than forgiveness: questions. He read it again under the pale desk lamp in his office, fingers tracing the folds like they might reveal a signature hidden in the grain. There was no name. No email, just guilt etched in silence. But 2 days later, the full weight of the letter surfaced. Olivia arrived at Aegis with a flash drive in her pocket, her eyes heavy with something darker than fatigue. She slid it across Ezra's desk without a word. What is it? He asked. It came with a second package, she said. No return address. Same postmark as the letter. Ezra hesitated, then plugged it in. The files opened instantly. Inside, a folder labeled Project Delta red lines. Inside that, over 20 documents. Each one was a work order, schematic or internal evaluation, from Ezra's years at Charleston Waters. But these weren't ordinary files. They were subtle line edits, shifts in attributions, rerouted approvals, and a pattern began to emerge. His name, E. Bell, was repeatedly replaced in report headers with initials like RJ or TC, both former supervisors. In one document, Ezra had clearly drafted a corrective maintenance protocol that later won the Marina a safety award. The version submitted to state regulators bore a different name entirely, but the most damning file was titled Suppress Directive. It was an internal memo sent to the Marina's HR director. Continue redacting Bell's contributions from performance summaries. Engineering accuracy acknowledged, but visibility needs to be managed. Recommend framing as team effort only. Do not use individual attribution without pre-clearance. Ezra stared at the screen, face unreadable. They rewrote your career, Olivia whispered. Systematically. The air between them thickened. Every ignored promotion, every unexplained project, reassignment, every time he was told, we'll give you something next quarter. I was never meant to rise, he said quietly. Just rotate. Olivia leaned forward. We have to release this. All of it. The public needs to see how deep it went. Ezra didn't hesitate this time. Do it. She spent the night compiling the exposé. The headline struck like thunder. Very genius how Charleston Waters sabotaged their brightest mind. The piece went live at midnight. By morning, Charleston Waters Marina's phone system had collapsed under a wave of cancellations, legal inquiries, and refund demands. Within 72 hours, their primary lender pulled funding. 3 commercial tenants terminated leases. 1 supplier filed breach of contract. On Friday, the Marina filed for bankruptcy. The news rocked the maritime world. What had started as a single act of disrespect, the smirking challenge to fix the leak, had grown into an institutional reckoning. And it wasn't just about Ezra anymore. Across the country, former dockhands, junior engineers, and technical staff began sharing their own stories. Threads of suppression that stretched from Miami to Maine. Olivia's inbox swelled. Advocacy groups cited her reporting in petitions for industry reform. But the most unexpected twist came from Hollywood. A major streaming platform contacted Ezra through his agent at Aegis. They were greenlighting a documentary titled, The Leak They Couldn't Stop. The producers wanted full access: the shed, the court transcripts, the apology letter. They promised no dramatization, just truth, presented raw. Ezra declined at first. I'm not a spectacle, he told Olivia. But she shook her head. No, you're a lighthouse. And people need to see what survival looks like, especially when it refuses to be quiet. He agreed under one condition: complete editorial control. Production began within the month, but just as the cameras started rolling, another headline broke. Winslow subpoenaed again. New charges emerge. Ezra stared at the TV in the break room, his lunch untouched. A federal press conference played on screen, based on new evidence tied to obstruction of justice and document tampering. This includes the suppression of federal workplace safety disclosures and deliberate sabotage of internal records, linked to a whistleblower, identified as Mr. Ezra Bell. The clip cut to a photo of the Sovereign Bell, and beneath it, an image of Winslow walking briskly through a courthouse in sunglasses, avoiding reporters. Ezra didn't speak, but inside, something long frozen began to melt. It wasn't vindication. It was clarity. For years he'd been told to be patient, to wait his turn, to prove himself again and again in silence. But silence had never protected him. Only the truth had. That night, as Ezra returned home, he found a courier waiting on his porch. The man handed him a thick envelope. Inside, a signed affidavit from a former senior federal contractor who had once rejected Ezra's scholarship application years ago. Handwritten at the bottom, "They told me to discard your file, said you were too smart to keep invisible." Ezra staggered back into his home, realizing his erasure had started long before the marina. The first school Ezra visited was barely held together. Chipped tiles, faded flags, and a science lab with broken gas valves. But the faces inside, bright-eyed, curious, wide open. It was a public middle school in Augusta, Georgia, one that had recently lost its engineering program due to funding cuts. When the principal introduced Ezra to the students, half of them whispered to each other, unsure whether this quiet work boot-wearing man was the same person they'd seen trending online. He stepped to the front of the auditorium. No slides, no entourage. "I wasn't supposed to be here," he began. "Not here in front of you, not in any lab, not in any title that begins with engineer. But I'm here because I learned something important." He paused. Resilience isn't quiet. It's the refusal to disappear when they expect you to. The students leaned in. He told them about his grandfather's silence, his father's broken hands, and the day he realized that fixing a yacht wasn't the victory, it was surviving a system designed to erase him that mattered more. Afterward, a little girl approached him shyly, holding a hand-drawn diagram of a boat engine. "Can you tell me if I drew it right?" she asked. Ezra crouched beside her, studied it carefully, then smiled. "You didn't draw it right," he said. "You drew it better." She beamed. It wasn't just one school. It became dozens. HBCUs, community centers, high schools across the South. Each time, Ezra didn't show up as a celebrity. He arrived as a builder, a man who had touched injustice and refused to let it harden him. Back in Charleston, a city council meeting passed a unanimous resolution to declare Ezra Bell Day every year on the anniversary of the Sovereign Bell's repair. Community leaders gathered at the city pier, where once they were kept off the VIP docks. Elders who had fought for civil rights long before hashtags embraced Ezra as one of their own. They called him the engineer who rewired the narrative. Olivia was there, standing off stage, not taking notes for once. She had shifted her focus, now leading the Bell Foundation, a nonprofit designed to fund scholarships, internships, and apprenticeships for underrepresented engineers. The foundation's mission, to elevate those whose brilliance had been buried, just like Ezra's had. Within months, they'd sponsored over 30 students and launched partnerships with marine tech companies that had once ignored diverse talent pools. Meanwhile, Thatcher Winslow's empire finally collapsed. The federal obstruction charges stuck. He avoided prison, but the financial penalties gutted his estate. The IRS seized several of his offshore assets. He was fined for workplace discrimination, wrongful termination, and ethics violations tied to public funding fraud. And most symbolic of all, the Sovereign Bell was repossessed. The yacht that once represented arrogance was sold at auction for half its worth. Proceeds went towards settlement payouts for former employees, most of whom never imagined they'd see justice in their lifetime. Winslow retreated from public life, his name now more cautionary tale than legacy. The man who once laughed on the dock became a footnote in the story of a worker he'd tried to erase. But Ezra wasn't content with just reflection. He took the settlement check from the class action case, pooled it with contributions from Aegis, and a quiet donation from a former Winslow investor, and purchased a struggling marina on the Georgia coast. He renamed it Legacy Dock. There were no gold plaques, no marble statues, just clean bays, quiet work, and a wall in the office where every employee's name was etched in full, without titles. Ezra ran it differently. Everyone trained. Everyone. Even janitors learned design theory. No one got promoted by being loud. They rose by lifting others. Every week, students from surrounding schools visited for hands-on workshops. Every summer, interns from underfunded districts got paid to build, test, fail, and build again. Ezra still worked the docks. Sleeves rolled, hands in the grease. He refused to be a figurehead. He fixed the small problems, calibrated the sensors, repaired busted rudders. And on certain days, he just sat by the water, silent, reflective, whole. One of those days, as the wind whispered through the mast cables and the sun carved light across the bay, a small voice broke the quiet. Ezra turned. A boy, maybe 8, maybe 9, stood beside him. He had pale skin, freckles, and wore a cap too big for his head. In his hands was a sketch pad filled with engine blueprints drawn in colored pencil. The boy held it up. "Are you the guy from the boat story?" he asked. "The one who fixed it in 10 minutes? Ezra smiled. "That's what they say." The boy nodded, eyes wide. "Can I learn from you?" Ezra didn't answer right away. He looked out at the water, at the pier behind him, at the shed where apprentices were currently arguing over the best turbine rotation angles, at the wall with all their names, his grandfather's photo, and his father's compass hanging beneath it. Then he turned back. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ben." Ezra took the sketch pad, flipped through the drawings slowly. "All right, Ben," he said. "Let's get to work." Later that evening, Ezra returned to the office to find a sealed envelope on his desk. No stamp, just his name handwritten in fine ink. Inside was a simple note. "The Department of Education is reopening your application from 2007. We found evidence of external suppression. You're being retroactively admitted. Signed, President of a top U.S. engineering university." Attached was a second page, an invitation to give the school's next commencement speech. Ezra stared at it, heart pounding. History wasn't just honoring him, it was correcting itself. Legacy Dock buzzed with life each morning before the sun rose over the water. Seagulls shrieked in the distance, diesel engines coughed into gear, and laughter, real, communal laughter, rose from the worksheds where young apprentices crowded around workbenches, their hands marked with grease and graphite. Ezra moved through them like water, fluid, observant, unhurried. He rarely raised his voice. He didn't lecture from podiums or speak in long-winded monologues. Instead, he pointed at pressure gauges when they ticked too high, tapped a misaligned bolt, until the apprentice noticed their mistake, and sometimes when they got it just right, he simply nodded once and moved on. Respect was earned through attention. His students came from every background: Black, white, Latino, Asian, immigrants, and native-born, sons of electricians and daughters of housekeepers. Some had dropped out of college, others had never applied. One had fled a foster home. Another had survived juvenile detention. But in Ezra's shed, none of that mattered. They were engineers in training, and Ezra taught them the same way he'd been taught, by doing, failing, and doing again. One morning, as the interns crowded around a faulty propulsion system from a deep-sea trawler, Ezra handed the tools to the quietest student, a young Vietnamese girl named Lynn, who always hovered on the edge of the group. "Your turn," he said. She hesitated. "I've never done it alone." "You're not alone," Ezra replied. "You're trusted." Ling's hands trembled slightly, but she reached in. 10 minutes later, the trawler's engine purred. She didn't smile until she turned around and found Ezra watching. He didn't clap, just nodded once. That was all she needed. Word of Ezra's mentorship spread. Schools began requesting guest lectures. Trade magazines wrote profiles. Even engineering boards began citing his workshop model as a gold standard for experiential learning. But Ezra never left Legacy Dock. His classroom was the marina, and his chalkboard was a boat engine held together by will and bolts. Meanwhile, Olivia's blog had become a media empire. Redline Uncovered now operated out of a full-floor office in Atlanta, with over 30 full-time staff, a satellite podcast studio, and a documentary division. Her team had taken down 3 corporate boards for systemic racism, launched a federal case involving wage theft, and uncovered environmental abuse in coastal Black communities. But she never forgot where it started. Ezra remained her compass. Every major story they ran asked the same foundational question: who's being overlooked while holding everything together? And though the world hadn't changed overnight, the landscape had shifted. Companies now reviewed their HR records more carefully, Engineering internships were distributed more equitably. A few universities publicly apologized for past admissions decisions, citing cases like Ezra's as the catalyst. But racism didn't vanish. It morphed. It retreated into more subtle policies, into cultural fit interviews and communication style critiques. It evolved. But now it faced opposition it hadn't expected. Young engineers trained by Ezra Bell who wouldn't back down, who questioned everything, who carried his quiet defiance into boardrooms. Still, not everyone learned. Thatcher Winslow, after years of hiding, gave his first interview in a closed-door segment with a right-wing media outlet. "I lost everything," he told the interviewer, leaning back in a chair carved from reclaimed yacht wood. "Not because I did anything wrong, but because I was the wrong person for them to hate." He claimed the marina collapse was a witch hunt, denied ever mocking Ezra, claimed Olivia's blog fabricated half the scandal. When asked about the apology letter someone in his circle had sent, Winslow scoffed. "If anyone wrote that, they're a coward. You don't apologize for running a business." He ended the interview with a sneer. "They'll be back in their place soon. Always are." The clip leaked online. The backlash was swift, but Winslow didn't care. He had stopped playing by public rules. The danger wasn't his audacity. It was his unrepentance. Ezra watched the clip late one night, after a student forwarded it. He didn't get angry. He didn't respond. He just turned off the screen, walked outside, and checked the dock lights. One had shorted again. He fixed it. But peace never lasted long. 2 weeks later, a federal notice appeared on Ezra's phone, flagged by his attorney. Subject to Charleston Waters Marina, active federal investigation. Attached was a PDF marked confidential. DOJ, Oversight Division. The investigation cited allegations of destruction of federal job training grant records, falsified racial compliance reports, suppression of worker safety complaints during VIP visits. Ezra scrolled through the report with shaking hands. He wasn't surprised they had lied. But they had falsified entire government reports under his name. Documents filed during his years at the marina, bearing his forged signature, used to secure funding, claim minority training success rates, and cover up safety failures he never even saw. He called Olivia immediately. "They used me to protect themselves," he said. She was already reading the same report. "And now they're caught." Ezra looked out at the young apprentices on the dock. Lon, Ben, Omar, Maya laughing, fixing, learning. They had no idea what storm was coming next. And this time, it wasn't about missed promotions. It was fraud tied to his name. As Ezra prepared a statement for the DOJ, his office line rang. A voice, old, southern measured, spoke slowly. "You don't know me, Mr. Bell, but I was one of the men who approved those forged documents, and I'm ready to tell the truth on the record." Ezra froze. The man had been a federal inspector, and now he was ready to flip. Legacy has a sound. For Ezra Bell, it was the low hum of generators, the click of ratchets, and the murmur of students solving problems in the back of his workshop. It was never applause, never flashbulbs, just the rhythm of work, of rebuilding a life that had once been buried under silence. But the world beyond Legacy Dock refused to stay quiet about him. By the start of the next year, Ezra Bell had become a national name, not a celebrity, but something heavier, more rooted. He was now listed among Ebony magazine's top 10 black engineers shaping the future. Time ran a special edition titled Blueprints of Resistance, featuring Ezra on the cover, sleeves rolled up, standing before a rusted engine block like it was a stage. What made his story so magnetic wasn't just the humiliation he endured. It was the calm moral defiance with which he turned it into fuel. Every time he was underestimated, Ezra built something greater. And the nation noticed. Back in Charleston, something strange happened. The same marina that once erased his name was now under new ownership, forced to rebrand, restructure, and rehire. A local coalition, led by grassroots leaders, and pressured by federal oversight, proposed something bold, a statue. Not one of politicians, not soldiers, but of a dockhand. A full bronze figure of Ezra Bell, crouched in workwear, one hand gripping a wrench, the other resting on the hull of the Sovereign Bell. The unveiling drew hundreds. Olivia stood beside Ezra as the cloth was pulled back, revealing the sculpture beneath. Some in the crowd cried. Others simply stood still, understanding the gravity. In the front row, an older black man whispered to his grandson, "You see this? They used to laugh at him. Now they learn from him." And also, Ezra spoke only briefly. I never wanted to be remembered, he said. I just wanted to be respected. Then something unexpected happened. Hollywood called. A major studio had acquired rights to Olivia's original blog series and court transcripts. They planned a feature film titled 10 Minutes That Changed Everything. A-list actors attached, a director known for centering stories of the forgotten. Olivia agreed to Ezra, reluctantly, agreed to have a voice in script approval. He made one thing clear. If you make me a hero, you missed the point. I was just one man standing still while the world tried to erase me. Despite himself, he watched the early trailers and quietly nodded when they got it right. But the spotlight brought shadows. Former Marina staff, once indifferent or complicit, now reached out with resumes in hand. Some begged for a second chance. Others apologized with long-winded emails, explaining they had followed orders, that they were scared, or they didn't realize what was happening. Ezra read each one. He didn't forget. But he didn't harden. He hired 3 of them. One, Jason Carver, the dockhand who testified in his defense, now ran inventory at Legacy Dock. Another, a former admin assistant, helped manage scholarships through the Bell Foundation. I'm not collecting enemies, Ezra told Olivia. I'm building people. If they're ready to work, I won't let bitterness block them. His humility didn't flinch. Despite the wealth now tied to his name, the speaking offers, the tech deals, the board seats, Ezra still lived in the same brick bungalow, off the coast, still cleaned his own tools, still fixed his mother's porch fan every summer. But history was catching up. In classrooms across the country, high school ethics students analyzed his testimony. In engineering departments, professors taught his ballast valve redesign. In business schools, case studies were written about Ezra Bell and the morality of power. One late fall afternoon, Ezra walked past a bookstore downtown and saw his own face drawn, sketched, softened on a children's biography. Ezra Bell, the man who didn't speak loud, but changed everything. He picked it up, flipped through and chuckled. They made me look 10 years younger. The clerk behind the counter grinned. My son wants to be you for career day. Ezra tipped his cap and walked out into the breeze. But history wasn't done writing. One evening, as the sky turned gold over Legacy Dock, Langston Miles approached Ezra with a quiet urgency. DC called, he said. Ezra looked up from his bench, wiping oil from his knuckles. For what? Langston held up a phone, screen glowing. An email from a senior aide in the West Wing. Subject, confidential, award nomination consideration. Body, Mr. Bell is currently being reviewed for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Please confirm availability for background vetting. Ezra didn't speak. His fingers slowly folded into fists, not in anger, but disbelief. Langston smiled. You ready to be a revolution, old friend? Ezra shook his head. I was never trying to lead one. Langston's voice dropped. That's exactly why you did. Just before midnight, Olivia texted Ezra a breaking news alert. A new leak, unrelated to boats this time, was surfacing online. A federal watchdog had uncovered systemic discrimination across dozens of maritime facilities, tied to the same funders who once backed Charleston waters. Ezra's name was referenced as the trigger point. Congress was opening hearings. The flood had only just begun. The sovereign bell never sold. After the lawsuits, the bankruptcies, and the public shame, no one dared attach their name to the vessel, once used to humiliate the man who would come to symbolize resilience. The yacht sat docked for 2 years, quietly gathering barnacles and history, until the National Museum of Black Innovation secured the rights to convert it into a permanent exhibit. They didn't polish it to brilliance. They left the smudges, the faint scarring along the undercarriage, where Ezra had first placed his hand. The interior was remodeled, not with marble or velvet, but with testimonies. The once lavish cabins now housed screens looping footage of the trial, letters from dock workers, and interviews with the apprentices who had trained under Ezra Bell. In the engine bay, a single plaque read, "He wasn't the engineer they wanted. He was the one they tried to bury." This is where he wrote. Each week, busloads of children filed through the vessel. Students from places where the science labs were underfunded, where teachers paid for supplies out of pocket, where dreams often ended at the city line. They entered in silence, wide-eyed. They left asking questions that teachers had no quick answers for. One third grader stared at the valve system and whispered, "So?" He just looked at it and knew. Another nodded solemnly. He listened to it. Ezra never visited the exhibit himself. He said it made him feel strange to walk through his own past while people narrated it. But he watched footage from time to time, usually alone, often late, hands clasped behind his back. Meanwhile, Olivia's final project, the culmination of years of reporting heartbreak and documentation, was about to be released. 10 Minutes That Changed Everything premiered at a modest theater in Atlanta. But the audience wasn't modest. Judges, engineers, students, journalists, and policymakers came. So did Langston, the apprentices, Olivia's entire newsroom, and even a few faces from the Marina days, now repentant, smaller, quieter. Ezra arrived last. He wore no suit, no press badge, just the same coat he wore when he first stepped off the dock. The documentary opened with a black screen. Then came Ezra's voice, layered with a subtle bass line. Strong, steady. I wasn't the one who needed fixing. The system was leaking, and someone had to say it. The film unraveled slowly. Honestly, it didn't rush. It showed every ugly detail, every rejection, every redacted document, every slur left hanging in the air like cigarette smoke. But it also showed the beauty. Students discovering their power, schools rewriting curriculum, apprentices now launching their own repair firms. When it ended, the room didn't erupt into applause. It fell into reflection, that weighty kind of silence, when people realize the world is built on backs they never thanked. Ezra stepped onto the small stage, not to speak, but just to stand with Olivia. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Thank you." Ezra lifted a hand, then said, "Don't thank me, just build better." Months passed, and Ezra slowed down. Just a little. He let others lead meetings, took longer walks around the marina, read more, talked less. But he still showed up, still watched. On one golden afternoon, he stood beneath the bleachers at a regional youth engineering fair, watching as 4 of his former students presented a breakthrough in buoyancy technology. They didn't know he was there, but Ezra didn't need the credit. He saw it in the way they spoke, with pride, with clarity, with defiance. They didn't ask for permission to be brilliant. They expected to be taken seriously. And that, to him, was victory. He returned to Legacy Dock later that evening, the sky soaked in amber. He climbed to the edge of the pier, sat on the same crate he once used as a workbench, and pulled out his old notebook, the one with smudged blueprints and oil stains from Charleston. He flipped to the last page. Blank. He smiled. That's when Ben, the boy with the oversized cap, now a teenager with grease under his nails, sat beside him. "Got a question, Mr. Bell." "All right." Ben hesitated. "How do you know when the system's really fixed?" Ezra paused, thinking. "When it doesn't pretend the cracks were never there." Ben nodded slowly. They sat in silence. Then the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows across the dock. And for a moment, everything stilled. The screen fades to black. Ezra's voice returns, warm and resolute. "You don't have to shout to make history. You just have to stand when they expect you to shrink. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it end at the credits. Support brilliance where it's buried, not just where it's broadcast. Question the systems that reward silence and punish resilience. And the next time someone's underestimated, remember Ezra Bell, and listen closer. Because the next revolution won't start with noise. It'll start with someone watching, waiting, and ready.